Okay, so I've decided to make a Starcraft video, and this one is it's for the benefit of my brother and my nephew because they've recently took up Starcraft and they love it. They both play Terran. They started as Terran and they've decided to stick to their guns. They stayed with Terran basically, and I've always been a Terran player myself. And the reason I play Terran is because I believe they've got the highest war potential in the end game, because when you've got like a Terran on, between 3 to 5 bases, they can literally just call down mules. So that's free mining, basically, that costs no supply. So that's what makes the Terran all-in possible when they throw all their SCVs into the fight. So because they don't have the need to keep those SCVs, they have a higher army supply in the end game. So to me, that says Terrans are the best race. But it's open to debate. 2013 proved to be, the year of the Protoss. They were storming over everyone. They've made changes to the Terran recently. Terran's coming back and is doing well. But to be honest, I would say the most broken unit in the game actually belongs to the Zerg. Because, with the free army supply that the Terrans get, the Zerg also gets something similar with the swarm hosts. Because they just keep pumping out locusts. And they've got stupid amounts of armor, and they do decent amounts of damage. They just wreck everything in their path, as long as it's not flying. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to boot up a unit test map made by Meum. I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that. It's M-E-U-M. And this is just so I can grab a bunch of units together, show you the basic unit compositions of the likes of the MMM build, which is the most popular Terran build and is a damn good build. The Terran war potential at the beginning of the game is pretty good compared to the other races. Zergling, of course, can attack sooner, but if you know how to build a wall, they really can't rush you. And the Protoss, well, they just start off slow anyway, but they have their advantages in the late game. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a bunch of units, because the reason I'm making this video basically is my brother was watching a YouTube video the other day talking about Terran strategy, and personally I felt it was badly done. It was like, oh, sometimes in the game I just build 2 Thors, and I like to keep one here and one over there. It's like, no, you don't just build things with no reason. And my brother learnt that in one of the matches we played, because he brought a couple of battle cruisers out to take out a couple of mines, widow mines that I had buried near his base, because I went for the strangle. I just kept him on 2 base and just strangled his resources until he ran out. But yeah, he brought out battle cruisers, and just because I saw them in that split second in the middle of the match, I was able to completely change my strategy. It's like, and that's what I want to teach him, because my brother and my nephew, they're good. They can get the hang of build orders. They know how to, do the generic MMM build and get started as a Terran. But what they don't know is the key matchups, the counters, because the battlecruiser, in my opinion, is one of the strongest units in the game. It is a phenomenal beast. It can fly, so anything that can't shoot up cannot touch it. It starts off with 3 armor naturally, so it can be bumped up to a massive 6 armor, making it one of the most durable units in the game. It has 500 ish HP, which makes it even more durable. So when a ton of battle cruisers come at you, what do? Well, there are several ways you can counter that, and through this video we're going to look at things like that. So enough babbling, let's get into the game. Okay, hang on. No, I need to change the stream over. Let's have a look. I'm going to need that, and bump that up, and hit hotkey, and there we go, now we're in the game. Alright, so the basic Terran build, MMM, is Marines, Mortars, and Medivacs. So let's bring them over. 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say about, yeah, 4. Okay, so the reason the Marine Marauder medevac strategy is quite strong is because you have the Marauders at the front. Oh, pardon me. They cost 100 mineral each to build, and the Marines only cost 50. So the Terran, of course, with the Mule, they're obviously going to be mineral heavy, which is why this army is so great. It's really economical. You get a lot of units, and the composition of the Marauder and the Marine itself is a great balance of damage and CC. The reason I say CC is because, as we all know, there is an upgrade called the concussive shells. Now, the concussive shells slow down anything they hit. So, if, say, for example, your opponent sends an Ultralisk at you, the concussive shell will slow it down. Marauders are a counter to the Ultralisk. I don't care what anyone else says. Like, hit it with tanks, whatever, do what you want, hit it with Banshees, Marauders. It slows them down. It stops them getting to the rest of your damage. And the Marauders are quite tanky as well. 125 HP at the start of the game. That's pretty nice. And they're cheap to build. Been through all that. Okay, so the medevacs, of course. Now, the Terran differs from other races in the sense that their regeneration is very, very, very limited. All Zerg units can heal in some way or another. Keep them out the battle, they will regenerate. So they're really efficient at staying alive, despite the fact that they're designed for early game. Protoss, 50% of their health, give or take, it depends on the unit, because of course Archons are literally full shield. So you're looking at 50% more or less of their HP, because the shield technically is HP, it's just the regenerative portion. So they don't get full regeneration like the Zerg do, and the reason they only get partial regeneration in their shield is because they're a very, very endgame focused race. They're supposedly supposed to win in the endgame. I say supposedly because I still think Terran endgame will beat it, just because of sheer numbers. Yeah, so the reason the Terran regeneration is difficult is because none of the units have natural regeneration apart from the Reaper, and the Reaper is only good at the start of the game. That's it. It's like you would not use a Reaper anywhere else because it's literally designed for harass. It gets up cliffs, it's cheap, it does a little bit of damage, so it's good for picking off, you know, just annoying the mineral line at the start of the game. So you need your medivacs for that reason. But the medivacs have a dual purpose. So all your ground forces here, straight into the medivacs. It's really nice to move around the map when you use the boost, as you can see. So this is why your MMM strategy is ideal, because it's very versatile, it can be mobile, and of course the medivacs, they heal the units on the fly. Let's see if we can just demonstrate that. You attack. Yeah, so there we go. So the medivacs are healing them up. They're just going to sit there and do that for a while. So it's a really good strategy. So the next question is, how do you counter the MMM strategy if it's so strong? Well, it's quite simple. What you'll see in a lot of Terran versus Terran is a ton of siege tanks. So let's move these guys out the way, because this is going to be quite interesting. And we'll put some siege tanks into the fray from this base here. Let's get about 3, I think. Now, this video that my brother watched, it says that, you know, Marauders are the counter to tanks. You could not be any further from the truth. The problem isn't to do with a tank versus Marauder, because we can actually demonstrate that. So there we go, our 4 Marauders, with no upgrades by the way, so ignoring the fact that Stimpack could be in play, and even with Stimpack in play, Marauders are still not the counter to the Terrans, to the tanks, sorry. And we'll just demonstrate that now. Yeah. Marauders aren't going to do anything. I could build more Marauders, but they could build more tanks. And here's the reason why it's not an efficient trade. Because 3 tanks took out 4 Marauders. 1 tank costs... oops. Wait, why aren't you showing me the cost? That's annoying. Actually, does it show me on the in-game menu? Let's have a look. Gameplay... no... Ah! I don't know where it is. No, it's probably not on the Yeah, there's normally a menu in game where you can just have a look at all the different units and like their stats and things like that. Okay, I haven't got that at the moment, but I can tell you now, the tank is about, I think it's either 125 or 150 mineral, and then it's 125 gas. So it costs more gas than a Marauder, but the mineral exchange is actually more efficient. And that's what you got to remember, because those 4 Marauders died to 3 tanks. And if we sent more Marauders at them, I mean, look, we only took 30% of the health off 1 tank. That's miserable. That's really, really bad damage. 4 Marauders should be doing a hell of a lot more damage, okay? The Marauders just can't get close enough. And of course, if you're playing Terran versus Terran, you're not just going up against tanks, because that's not how you play. If you think, you know, tanks are the most amazing unit in the game, by all means, you know, try it, tanks on their own. But normally, any good or half-decent player is obviously going to back up the tanks. And they back them up with Marines. So a lot of Terran versus Terran, in the previous meta, I would say, the meta's changed a lot because of Korean players like Pult and Tasia. They've really ramped things up, and the Terran is actually looking more like a Zerg early game. It's really scrappy, it's really fast, and it hits hard. Right, so yeah, because normally you'll have Marines with your tanks, and the reason you have your Marines with your tanks is obviously your Marines can shoot up and down. The Marine is the most cost-efficient unit in the game, regardless. Doesn't matter what you say, it is the best unit in the game, early game. Obviously, yeah, okay, so they can shoot up and down at the start of the game. The Zerglings cannot. The Zealots cannot, which gives the Marine a massive advantage, even though there's no units at the start of the game that you really want to pick off. I mean, the only thing the Protoss will be building early game is the Mothership Core, which you would want to snipe with Marines. And likewise, the Zerg, they've only got Overlords at the start that they can send at you, because they need to level up to a lair before they can actually get the Spire out. So it doesn't come into effect at the start of the game, but the fact that they can shoot up makes them efficient throughout the game. The backbone of the Terran army is the Marines, so you would not be facing just tanks, you would not be facing just Marauders, you'll be facing a combination of both of them. Okay, and of course, if I send the Marines in as well, they last even worse than the Marauders, because they have less health. And anyone who just attack moves anyway with their entire army is going to face a situation like this, where their medivacs are going in as well. And the Marines just rinse through. Okay, so how would you beat that composition? It's a good question. Well, this is why Terran versus Terran annoys a lot of people, because the perfect counter to the Marine tank is a Marine tank. That's it, there's no question about it. So the Terran have to use abilities. Let's level these up.
Upgrade complete.
So you have to use abilities like the scan, so that you can see where your opponent has set up his defensive line. And it is a very long war of attrition. That's what happens in Terran versus Terran. But there is a way you can get around it, and tanks are stupid. Absolutely stupid. Right, so let's build a couple of medivacs and let's fill them up with something durable. Marauders. What capacity is it? I think we can get 4 in it. Let's have a look. Wow, I don't know why this... Okay, I'm playing this in arcade, by the way. That's how I can control both teams. And apparently they've not updated the UI properly. I don't know what's going on here. But basically, I think their capacity is only 4. So yeah, with the tanks being stupid, and I literally mean being stupid, the way you beat them is just to drop your army on top of them, and they will shoot each other. They will shoot their own army. They are absolutely retarded. Right, but let's see if I can get this in. Yeah, sort of. No. Yeah, it's not easy to do, but you can pull it off. So let's go into chat. Is this kill? So let's build just the tanks on their own, because what you'll find is with the tanks being sieged up, a player will they will tend to move their marines around a bit, because once your tanks have like battered their front line and you're about to push forward, your marines are probably going to go in first. So trying to drop on tanks isn't easy to do if it's a marine, obviously marine tank composition. So we'll try that again. So the reason I'm using Marauders is because they are more durable than Marines, so the tanks will spend more time shooting at them. Obviously in this situation, if they're stranded on their own, obviously you don't want to use the medivac, I'm well aware of that, before you start debating it. But if you're like in the middle of a fight against someone, you would want to send the medivac round the back and then just drop on top. So let's see if we can do this. So basically about 4 or 5 of the Marauders got damaged then. So the tanks contributed to their own deaths, literally. So that's how you beat tanks. Yeah, so Marine tank beats Marine tank. There's no other way around it. So if you say put some Marauders into the mix, you could probably beat them that way, maybe attempt a drop. So you'd have to basically just use your tanks to chunk down their Marines. Once their Marines are out the way, you do the safe drop. Or the other option is just to have some Banshees with the army, because of course the Banshees are amazing. They, because the tanks can't shoot up, so that's how you beat them. Yeah, my throat's getting a little croaky at the moment. So yeah, now Marauders, they're not really a specialist unit, but like I said, the Reaper is very specialist. And we'll bring a couple of them out just to demonstrate why. Because the Reaper itself is only 60 HP. I say only. The Marines have like 45, but your Reaper costs more, and it costs a lot more Vespene as well. It costs more Vespene than a Marauder, which is quite surprising. But there, you really want to, when we talk about the cost of a Reaper, it is mainly the mineral cost we're trying to get back. If you can get 2 kills with a Reaper, you've already done your work. Any more kills after that is excessive, and you're in a massive lead, because you want to be bringing these guys out within the first few minutes of the game. What I'll do is, after going through this arcade game, I'll show you the generic startup for the Terrans and the MMM build. And what we'll do is we'll show like subtle changes in the start of your build that can dramatically change the outcome, how much resources you have and at what point. Because some builds are more extreme than others, like going for a Hellion Rush. That's a favourite of mine as well. But yeah, back to the Reaper. So the Reapers can jump up and down cliffs, which is ideal at the start of the game. So in a Terran versus Terran, you're obviously going to have a wall, say here, at the ramp, and you want to use the Reapers to get some harassment done. Now, a lot of players, from what I can gather, looking at other YouTube videos and streams, is players are always looking for that low macro or low micro kind of builds, but no, you don't want that. You don't want a low macro kind of build. So before you can even get to the stage where you can use Reapers, what you'll need to practice is you'll need to practice a lot of your macro. So the MMM strategy, for example, just practice that until you've got your base nailed, and as you get faster at building your base, you will realise you've got loads more time in between, and then you'll adjust your build yourself, and you will then be able to use the Reaper efficiently and effectively. So in a Terran versus Terran, a Reaper start is good, because it gets around walls. And if you're a Terran and you're not building a wall, you're an idiot. That's it. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're against Protoss, it doesn't matter if you're against Zerg, just build the damn wall. There are so many times in professional play where I will see players like, I wouldn't say, yeah, Pult sometimes does it. Jackchi I've seen has done it. MMA's done it as well, where they won't build the wall at the ramp in a TVT, and that is a silly mistake. You sit there and you think, well, what's the point? Because if they go Reaper first, they're going to get in the base anyway, so I can save a little bit of time and get a little bit more resources by not building the wall. That's true, but let's say they haven't gone Reaper, which is like the 90% other of the Terran builds. Yeah. So, because a proxy barracks, for example, you don't go Reaper in a proxy barracks because you need to attack fast. So you don't want to waste time mining gas because you need all the mineral you can get. So if they've gone proxy barracks and you've decided, oh, I'm not going to build a wall, you're dead. And then if they see that you've not built that wall because you're in a TVT, then they're going to do it again. There was a player last year at the Global Finals, I can't remember his name, Protoss player, and his first his first 6 games in the WCS Finals, he cheesed 5 of them. Because people don't expect it. You cheese them in the first match, they're like, okay, we're going to have a normal game in the second. No, cheese them again. And then they're more likely after the second game to say, oh, well, yeah, he's not going to do it 3 times in a row. Yeah. So, just build the damn wall. I'll show you the wall later. Right, so Reapers are really good at the start of the game. They're weak, and as you can see over here, they have the combat drugs. So out of combat, they can heal pretty quickly, which is their defense mechanism against Marines. It's their defense mechanism against Queens and Zerglings in the early game. Definitely against Zealots. They don't even need it against Zealots, because a Zealot should not touch a Reaper. It's melee, right? But of course, the Mothership core, Reapers can't shoot up. So, they're dead in the water there. Excuse me one more moment while I have another drink. Now, what is the counter to the Reaper? Because Reaper can get up the cliffs. They can, obviously if there's no wall there, they could just walk in anyway. So, you're at the start of the game, you've got your wall down, you've got your barracks. Well, if you're a Terran player, you know exactly what time they can get that Reaper, because to get that Reaper, they have to mine gas a lot earlier than they normally would, because generally speaking, you go 4 Marines, sorry, not 4 Marines, 4 SCVs, supply depot, 2 SCVs, barracks. Now, some players go for a super aggressive build where they will get the refinery when they get the 2 SCVs after the supply depot. Now, that is generally tiered towards, I think, the Reaper, Hellion, Banshee, Harass, because that's a little, you know, that's quite Vespene hungry, gas hungry. Yeah. So once you start building your barracks, you build 3 SCVs and your refinery. That's the normal time to do it. Now, what you can do is you can build the refinery before you build the 3 SCVs, or you could build the 3 SCVs and then the refinery. It generally doesn't matter. You're going to have slightly less mineral income if you build the refinery first, and you want to build the refinery first if you're going to go Reaper. Now, if you choose not to build the refinery first, you will have the extra minerals, and you will be able to complete your wall much sooner than your opponent. So, what happens when that wall's up? Well, you start building Marines. Your opponents, on the other hand, they then need to build a tech lab, and they then need to build Reapers. So at the start of the game, just build about 4 Marines. Set them in your mineral line, and Reapers are countered. That's it. Yeah, so I don't need to talk anymore about the Reaper. It's a nice unit, but you need skill to use it, and to counter it, just get some Marines in your mineral line. Okay. Now, we've already talked about the Marine. A great counter to the Marine is obviously the tank. The tanks do, I think it's 30 or 35 damage, and that's whilst the siege stop. So that's a massive amount of damage on almost all of a Marine's life. So if you're getting hit with 2 tanks, even if the first volley doesn't hit all your Marines, the splash damage from 2 tanks is guaranteed to wipe them out. Yeah. So the Marauder, as we already know, again, they can't shoot up, which is a massive disadvantage for them. But like I said, the MMM build, you have Marines with them that can shoot up. And the reason... oh no, sorry. I've already talked about the reason you have the Marauders in that build. Okay, so let's talk about the Ghost then. Now, sometimes my nephew likes to put a few Ghosts in there. One thing I will say about things like the Ghost and the Raven, they are spellcasters. Now, a lot of people... Actually, I'd say a lot of people, I personally don't see them as much of a spellcaster, and that's because I'm playing mostly Terran versus Terran against my brother and my nephew, and the only advantage to having a Ghost in a TBT is you're trying to have, you're trying to have like a DT, a Dark Templar in your build, and it just doesn't quite work. The damage is nice, and versus light, so they will take half the health of Marine with a single hit. So a cloaked, cloaked Ghost can be quite annoying. And let's have a look at the SCV health. Right, 45, so same as a Marine. So they're not even good at hitting the minimal lap, because as you progress into the late game, you're gonna have turrets around your base, missile turrets that is. You're possibly gonna have a Raven, because look at the detect tree to get to the Ghost. Once you have the barracks, I think you can then go... Oh no, you can't. You need the factory. You need the factory before you can get the Ghost Academy, I think. If I'm not mistaken. See, this is how little I use them. I just don't care about them. But yeah, it might be barracks and then Ghost Academy, I'm not sure. But if it's factory, then Ghost Academy, that's equal to a factory and then a starport. So when you add on the time it takes to research Cloak, sorry. Yeah, so when you add on the time it takes to research Cloak, as you can see, that's pretty much the same as building the tech lab. And I think, if I could actually be correct on this one, I'm not too sure, but I think you can go all the way up to Starport with a tech lab in the same time it takes to build the Ghost Academy and then the Cloak, and then build a single Ghost. And the important thing is to remember that the Raven can detect the Ghost. So if your opponent has like a bunch of Ghosts on the map somewhere, just get a damn Raven, and job done. Oh, speaking of the Raven, there's a little trick I want to show you in a minute, but we'll talk about that later. Now, the Ghost is a very specialist unit. Actually, let's have a look at the EMP first. Deals 100 damage to and energy. Okay, that's good. Energy. Right. So it is a very specialist unit. So it can be used against spellcasters. So the Ghost, in essence, can counter the Raven because the Raven is a spellcaster. It has a bunch of energy and it casts, you know, these things, right? So the EMP from it should actually deplete all the energy. Oh no, sorry, 100 points of energy. That's what you got to remember. You got to be careful of that. So it's good to have the energy indicators as you're playing the game. So yeah, it has limited use against Terrans because the Ghost and the Raven are the only units that use energy in the Terran army. Amongst the Zerg army, there are actually a few units that use it. The obvious one being the Infestor, of course, because that just has like a bunch of nasty abilities that I absolutely hate. Here's a free army of infested Terrans, go kill stuff, and things like that. And against Protoss, it is massively, massively useful. But you wouldn't use it for the sake of it against Protoss. And that's to do with whatever build your Protoss player is going for. So, in a TVT, the Ghost is generally not worth getting. Because even if, you know, for example, you don't have a Raven out, there he is. What's Cloak gonna do? Nothing. So you don't want to use the Ghost in a Terran versus Terran matchup. Okay. But yeah, his sniper round does quite a lot of damage. Because even though it does 25 damage there, if you're a League of Legends player, you'll understand why it's important. Because it's an attack. I'm not sure if it's an attack reset, but if you like shoot with your main weapon, then you snipe around and then you shoot again, you can actually do double the damage of a tank versus light, because you're doing roughly 60 points of damage in a short space of time. So against a single target, you can do a phenomenal amount of damage. It's useful for that if you use it in bursts, but then of course you have to wait for the energy to come back again. Can I shoot? No, can't shoot me, Raven. Fine, I'll EMP you to death. Boom. Boom. Yeah. So I can get 2 sniper rounds off there, and as you can see, it takes a while to regenerate that energy. So just keep an eye on that clock until it reaches 75, basically. So when you're going against a Terran, the reason that clock is important is, of course, because you're going to go against Mass Marine, Mass Marauder. Oh man. So it's not going to be any good if you're in the middle of a battle with 20, Marines right in front of you, and you're like, which one should I snipe? And how long am I waiting for the energy to come back? Because a normal bullet, oh no, sorry, yeah, because the Marine is light, it will do 20 damage per attack. This is without upgrades, by the way. We're not going to involve upgrades, because there's no point. The only reason you use upgrades, well, you sort of use upgrades aggressively if you're going for a timing attack. So apart from that, both players are going to try and get upgrades, so at the end game you both got upgrades anyway. And you should be even. Okay, so enough with bio units. So the MMM strategy, that's a good word, bio. It is a bio army. Everything is biological, and the medevac heals biological units. If you're in a team game, anything that has biological on it can be healed, which is one of the reasons Terran Zerg matchups, team play, is phenomenal. Because when you've got a Terran dropping Marines everywhere, and then you reinforce with like roaches or something, roaches are stupidly tanky. They are really tough units, and they're like the second unit in the game for the Zerg. So if you've got a medevac above it, healing it, it's better than any Marauder, any number of Marauders. It's just a beast to kill. Anyway, so back to TVT. Let's start with your mech. Okay, so the Hellion, I love the Hellion. It is a nasty piece of work. It's light, which is very important because I think tanks can just shit all over them. Let's have a look. Oh no, tanks are better against armoured. Ah, I stand corrected. But still, 35 points of damage, and a Hellion has 90 health. So 3 tanks will just obliterate Hellions. And the other thing you got to think about is the fact that the Hellions do fuck all. They do no damage to vehicles. Are they gonna win? No, because their damage is going down because they're dying. Ah, there you go. Yeah. So, for that reason, because the tank is the mid-game unit for the Terrans, you obviously don't want to use Hellions in the mid-game unless you're really clever, and we'll talk about that later. So, the Hellions, again, like the Reaper, are an early-game aggressive unit, and normally what you do is you build the Reaper and then you transition into Hellions, and the way you do that is by macro management. Because there's a little trick every Terran can do. So let's just build a... Oh really? Oh wow, everything in the tech tree is unlocked except the barracks? Alright, yeah, let's build a supply depot. There we go. And now we can build the barracks. Okay. So generally what you do at the start of the game, to use a Hellion focused gameplay. You start with your barracks, you build one Reaper out of the barracks, and then you stick a reactor on it. Now the reactor is important because you want to build Hellions 2 at a time, because they're no good on their own. One Hellion going into a base. Now remember, let's say I went Reaper first. You built the 4 Marines in the mineral line. Yeah? The Reaper's dead. 1 Hellion is going to do nothing against it. In fact, if I saw Marines in the mineral line, I would probably be hesitant to use Hellions. So, as a Terran player, take advantage of the Terran macro. The Terrans can lift up their base and walk it away somewhere. Well, fly it away. So, you do this. Once you built your factory at the start of the game, you literally just swap it with your barracks. And there you go, start pumping out two Hellions at a time. Now, generally speaking, the professional players, they will use the Hellion in order to take map control. And map control isn't like, oh, take this location here or secure this bridge here. It's like, no, stop your opponent entering the rest of the map. That's what you want to do. So you want the Hellion out roughly, well, before they get their first expansion, basically. If you can get it into their base, you're going to do massive damage to like groups and groups of SCVs, and I'll show you why. Let's pull them over here. So I'm going to try and be clever. Let's have you guys lined up nicely there. Lining up is important because that's the way the Hellion focuses its damage. So we'll have a group here, just not so lined up, I guess. Okay, so let's build our Hellions. Oops, wrong button. Okay, so generally at the start of the game, if you're just going to harass, you probably would only go for 2 Hellions. Have these guys got blue flame? I think they do. I'm gonna have to check that. Oh, here's one way to check. Go get him! No, they don't. Okay, see how much damage they do to an SCV? They're not gonna kill an SCV in 1 shot. Or 2. 2 Hellions, obviously, they're gonna kill an SCV in 2 shots, which is kind of what you want at the start of the game. But normally you want to take a lot of aggression with you, so you would take 4 Hellions. The reason you take 4 isn't purely because 4 Hellions will destroy an SCV. It's the spread of the flame. That's what's important. Because if you've only got 2 Hellions firing in 2 different directions, then they're not going to catch all of the SCVs in the area. And we can sort of demonstrate this. So I get them there. Okay, see, 2 of them. 2 of those SCVs were missed out. We did a lot of damage to, you know, the ones over there, but what's that going to do? You know, it's not going to kill all of them. So if we take 4 into the fray, we kill them, and we get a good spread of damage. Yeah. And of course, if they're lined up, then, you know, all of them are just going to take damage anyway. So that's what you want to aim for. When you're running around their mineral line with a Hellion, you want to try and position yourself that you can hit a group, or rather a line of SCVs all at once to maximize the damage. So you got to remember, it's a very linear, it's not like a cone, it's a line. It's straightforward, that's where the damage is going. Okay. Now, there are other reasons to use the Hellion, and we'll go on to that in a bit when we look at the Hellbat, because that has a very specific use as well. I'm just going to take another quick swig of my drink. And I'm back. So let's look at my brother's favourite unit. The goddamn Widowmine. He loves just spamming it because it is so goddamn cheap. Right, the Widowmine is an absolute bastard because look at its damage, right? Its damage is 120. Marines have 45 health. Marauders have 125. So it will literally obliterate, you know, almost kill a Marauder. 2 of them are going to kill anything. Anything up to, I think, Thor or Battlecruiser. Because I think a tank only... how many does the tank have? In fact, you know what, let's show what these guys can do. Right, you sit off there. You can build a tank. That's it. Alright, so this team cannot see it. Shouldn't be able to see it. Yeah. Bang. look at that. So a tank only has 160, right? And he's now down to 35 health. A couple of Marines, a Marauder, is just going to obliterate it. And also, the Widowmine does splash damage. But you have to be very careful. This is something I don't think my brother and nephew are aware of yet. But the Widowmine will damage your own unit. And there's a really, really funny game. And I feel so sorry for Tasia. I think it was at Home Story Cup, or it was Team Story Cup, one or the other. And he was playing against Stefano. And Stefano even caught this as well. Tasia did this massive doom drop where he got all his forces into his medevac, about to drop his opponent, and he goes past one of his Widow Mines right as it was taking out a Mutalisk. It obliterates 4 or 5 medevacs full in one shot. Bang! The whole lot goes up, and Stefano's just sitting there like... and Tasia, oh, the look on his face like... Yo, it was funny to watch. So here's a little trick to beating the Widowmine, and I discovered this with one of my friends in a recent match. The Raven doesn't attack, but the turret does. Let's have a look at your range. Alright, that doesn't help because I'm going to have to move the screen. Okay, so let's get a turret in range of that here. So outside the Widowmine's range. Now watch this. Widowmines don't shoot buildings. Boom. So the Raven is a hard counter to the Widowmine for 2 reasons. This little turret is classed as a building. So if you were to research the structure upgrade, not only do your other buildings obviously get a buff, but these get a buff as well. So the Raven we'll talk about later when we talk about Raven strategy. But for now, it's a hard counter to the Widowmine. It can see them. The Widowmines can't shoot the turrets. And what's even more funny is the Raven also has the point defense drone, shortened to PDD. So any missiles that come flying at you, the PDD will shoot it down. So Widowmines suck against Ravens. That's the end of that. Of course, if you're going against Terran versus Terran, it's very easy to get rid of Widowmine. It's very easy to get rid of It's very easy to get rid of Widowmines because you could just scan. It's as simple as that. So your normal generic TVT matchup is your Marine Marauder tank, for example, T versus T. Not talking about other matchups, of course. So you got, well, I personally would just build Marines and tanks. I don't bother with Marauders in that composition, just so I could get more Marines, because I think Marines are great. So tanks and Marines, what will generally happen is the Marines will go in first, get blown up by the Widowmines, you back up a little bit, siege your tanks up, scan the mines, the tanks will just get rid of the mines really easy. So scanning and tanks will beat the Widowmine, and also the Raven, again, is a massive hard counter to it, because the cost of this one Raven is massively lower than sending in a group of tanks supported by 100 Marines, for example. So one Raven on its own can do the job superbly. Right, moving on. So we've covered the Widowmine. Tanks were pretty much covered. They shoot each other because they're idiots, and they can't shoot up because, you know, the Dominion decided, hey, why don't we build this tank with no defenses? Well, to be honest, what tank shoots up? I'm going to go into the Hellbat after the Thor. Now, the video I watched, like I said, oh, I just build a Thor here and a Thor here, and then I use a Thor against a Roach. No! No! Do not use the Thor against a Roach. I even have a replay, which I won't show you today, but it was against my brother. I went Zig. I took the tunneling claws, and I literally just dug into his base. I poked the front of his base. He brought like 5 Thor out to greet my roaches, and I just said nope. Went underground whilst his wall was dropped, went into his base, caused mayhem. He sent his Thor after me. if your roaches can dig underground, then you're not going to let them stand there and take a beating from the Thor. You're going to dig them underground and then let them regenerate, then pop them up, attack the Thor, go down. Because not only is the Thor good against the roach, but the roaches are never on their own. One Thor, one roach, yes. A group of roaches, one Thor, no. And the reason is, lots of little things always beats one big thing. That's what you got to remember. So one Marauder against a tank isn't going to win, even though the Marauder can beat a tank. You're going to need a lot of Marauders to beat one tank. Right? Yeah. So the Thor does have his special uses. He is a specialty unit. He actually has, though. This is one of the big things about the Thor. His armor at the start is only 1. Now, something like a Ultralisk at the start of when it comes out, it's got 3 armor already, as far as I can tell. It is a massively armored beast, and it's roughly the same price as well. 1-on-1, I think the Thor should win simply because it attacks twice. Yeah, see, that's the massive thing about the Thor. Now notice this, it only does 30 damage. So, like I said, lots of little things destroy one big thing. So, the actual counter to the Thor is just send in the Marines. It's like, okay, a Thor's good against the Roach, send in the Zerglings. It just does not have the firepower, the rate of fire to tackle them. And if your opponent is using pure Roaches, they're a bad player. Right? Don't get me wrong, Roaches are great, but look at players like Hyun, look at players like Jaedong. Yeah? They don't just build Roaches on their own. Hyun is a very good player to look at, because they don't call him the Roach King for nothing. At least I think he's the one they call the Roach King. I'll have to recheck that. But there's a really, really, really good match from, I think it was last year or the year before, and it was MLG Anaheim, and it was Hyun versus Pult, and Hyun displays this superb control. Sadly, Pult won that match. Pult is amazing. I love Pult to bits. He's one of my favourite players at the moment. And Hyun, he is one of my favourite players. He's making a comeback and a half. He recently joined Rocket, and I don't know what they did. It's like they swapped Hyun for a machine, and he is killing everyone. Okay, so what happened in the match was Hyun beat down the front door of Pult's base. He got right into the natural. And he did it with, I think, a Roach Baneling bust? I'm not too sure. So, for a start, the Roaches went on their own. They were with Banelings. And then, what did he do? The instant he knew he was going to get through that front door, he queued up 70 Zerglings. It doesn't matter what is in Pult's base. 70 Zerglings is a phenomenal force to take care of. 70 little things running around. It doesn't matter if your 10 Marines combined have X amount of DPS. That X combined DPS has to be combined on one target. And if you're throwing it at one Zergling, it's a waste. So your damage is always going to be spread out. And that's something a Thor can't do. He can't spread his damage out. Even if he kills a Zergling in the first shot, his second shot is cancelled. He doesn't switch target between shots. He's not supposed to do that. That would make him broke as hell. So, yeah, Zerglings beat the Thor. Surprisingly, well actually unsurprisingly, the Zealot beats the Thor. At first, they won't do it too well at first. They don't trade very well because Zealots will need the charge, of course. But once they have the charge, they can get into a Thor whilst it's firing its first shot. You probably get like 4 or 5 Zealots right in there and just kill it. So lots of little things beat something big, and that's one of the important thing about that as well, which is why you don't do it. Even though, like, say I built 2 tanks and you think I'll build 2 Thors to go against it, the cost of the Thor to the tank, the cost of the Thor to Marines, I can't remember what the price of it is at the moment, but we're talking about 390 minerals, or it might actually be 400 minerals. So 8 Marines is the cost of a Thor, and 8 Marines will obliterate a Thor. I hope, as I'm about to try and test. But I will show you why the Thor is important in a second. So let's see if we can do this. We're not going to drop them in, because the Thor has an anti-air weapon, which I'll talk about. But don't forget, his basic attack is just 2 shots per bump. And let's have a look at his health. 400 health. So he is doing 10 times the health of one of these Marines. So he's got more health at the moment than all of these guys combined. Actually, he might be a little off. No, I think they have slightly more HP. But anyway, lots of little things beating a big thing. Let's go. Let's see who wins. Ta-da! So that Thor, right, traded very, very, very inefficiently. He lost more than half his health against Marines. And those Marines will just come back in a second, because you can build Marines really fast. They cost mineral. A Terran has abundance of mineral because he's got a mule. So he can throw Marines away. And, you know, to be honest though, the counter to the Thor, obviously, if you're like me, thinking that maybe Paul was wrong. Paul wasn't wrong, because you just send more Marines. But the Thor, the Marauder, sorry, is definitely good against it, because the Marauder does more damage against armoured. The Thor doesn't even move that fast. He's a very slow unit, as you saw him trundling along then. The Marauder moves faster than the Thor. It has the concussive shells, again, as we spoke about before, will slow the Thor down even more. And because the Marauder do extra damage against armoured, they're just gonna trash through a Thor. You take, like, if 4 should definitely do it, because it's gonna take the Thor, I think, 3 shots to kill a Marauder. If they go 125 health, I think they do. Okay, so why would you want to use a Thor if it sucks against the ground units? Obviously, you would want to use them against larger units, but also the Thor is a massive tank. Don't forget that extra 1 armor. So the reason the Marines didn't kill the Thor is because they were 0-0 Marines fighting against a 0-1 Thor, because it's 1 at the start. It has that 1 armor upgrade already. And I think that's what they use to balance it against Marines. Otherwise, what's the point in building a Thor? So the Thor's main use, and the reason it's a special unit, a specialized unit, is because of its anti-air weapon. So generally, what you'd use it against is in a TVT matchup. Sorry, not TVZ matchup. Sorry. And let's build some of these. Wait, oh yeah, you have to do it that way. Off you go. So the Thor's anti-air weapon is very good, and you normally want to use it against groups of units in the air, because it does splash damage. Or at least it's supposed to do splash damage. What the hell? Yeah, I think that's a bit of a bug. They are supposed to do splash damage, which is why they wreck groups of Mutalisks. But also, you're going to be kiting them around, and one of the problems with air units is they don't have collision boxes in the air until they stop. I'm not sure why Blizzard put that in, but it is kind of nasty, because as you can see, they group into one little bit of space. So generally, your Thor is just going to hit them all anyway. So in a Terran versus Terran matchup, you use the Thor against groups of air units, which is very important because that means it builds into a different composition later. And again, because it's so tanky, it's got that 400 HP and that extra 1 armor, he's great for the front line. Even though he's slow, push him out in front, let him take the damage, distract the other units, and then bring in your Bioforce and you will just wipe out everything. So he's great in the end game. He's great against specific strategies. Like the Mutalisks, for example. So moving on to Terran Air, where we would use the Thor is against groups of Vikings. Now, Vikings, again, they're even slightly specialised, especially in TVT, because you've got the Marines that can shoot up. They're going to rinse through Vikings like there's no tomorrow, because the Viking really doesn't have much HP. It has the same as a Marauder. So it's just going to get wiped out, because in air mode, they can't shoot down. And I always say this, you know, a Viking on the ground is a dead Viking, and let's see if I can prove this. Build some more units. Let's get some, yeah, let's try Marines at first. let's see how they do in this trade-off. Okay, here we go. Alright, so they're doing good against Marines. But they're probably not going to do so well against Marauders, for example. 12 damage. Yeah, yeah, that explains it. So, these take, I think it's 4 shots. So all 4 of them were killing Marines, like, instantly. But against the Marauder, they're going to have to do something like 10 shots. Massive difference. So, like I said, the Terran isn't just going to have Marines in their composition. They're going to have tanks, which will obliterate them, because, you know, right here, armoured. So the tanks are going to rip through them. And of course, Marauders are going to rip through them. Now, the strength of the Viking, obviously, isn't in its ground capabilities. But we'll come back to the ground capabilities in a second. Its strength comes in its air fighting capability, because like the Thor, it takes 2 shots, and it's good against armoured. So the rule still stands. Lots of little things can destroy one big thing. And a Viking, I think, is the same cost as a Reaper. And what you normally do is you build, if you're going for the MMM strategy, you're going to have a, what's it called? Reactor. You're going to have a reactor on your starport so that you can build the Vikings 2 at a time. Why not? So you're going to build them pretty fast, and if they do something like, say, a battlecruiser all in, which is something I, for one, am quite fond of. I love battlecruisers; they're amazing. Why wouldn't you want to build one? So let's build one. Now, there's only 4 Vikings. I don't expect them to do well, because like I said, at the start, 3 armor, and it has a massive amount of HP. 550 HP. That is massive. So let's send it in. Now, its attacks are quite fast. It should do pretty decently, I think. Yeah. This guy even attacking? Yeah, he's attacking. So, we have here the same situations we had with Thor and the tank earlier, I think. So, lots of little things beat one big thing, and you gotta remember the cost as well. Sorry, stutter. The battlecruiser is the most powerful, most tanky Terran unit, and therefore it costs a phenomenal amount. It is one of the few units in the game that are actually really well armoured and do decent damage to both ground and air. I think the only successor to it is the Protoss carrier. The Zerg, obviously, they have Mutalisks, but the Mutalisks are very Vespene heavy. Well, I'm not going to go into them, but they don't trade very well. Against battlecruisers they will, but cost efficiently, no. So, those Vikings, 75 each. Talking what? Well, that's really good. So we're talking 300 minerals, 300 Vespene. The battlecruiser stands heavily at something like 475 minerals. I'm not sure if that's the exact number. I could be a little off. And about 300 Vespene. So it's a massive difference. And that was just 4 Vikings. One of them didn't even get killed. So that was an effective trade. So your Viking is good against Terran air. So you want to use them against a Raven heavy force, or even just to pick off a Raven. And they're also good to do a little bit of scouting with, because they're nice and nimble compared to the other units. I don't think they have the same speed as a Medivac, but don't quote me on that. Ideally, you don't want to scout with a Viking anyway, because, you know, its health is low. It's got no armor. It's just not a scout unit, to be honest. The only reason you would scout with it is if you know your opponent is an idiot who just decides, oh, I'm going to go Marauder tank and I'm not going to do anything else. So you might as well scout them with a Viking. What are you going to do, send your barracks in? Some Terrans do that. Yeah, so the Viking is good en masse. You want to use it against big tanky targets, against some of the other races, of course. Like I said, the carrier, you obviously want to use it against them, Void Rays. Tempest. Tempest is a little tricky. Now Tempest can kite for days, so trying to take out a Tempest with Vikings is not as easy as it sounds. So you'd want something. I'm not really sure. I've never had to go against Mass Tempest because I don't play ranked. I just play with my friends. So, but I'll look into that. Again, this is all about Terran versus Terran. So we'll talk about that matchup a different day, I guess. So moving on, the medevac, self-explanatory before. It picks things up, drops them off. Actually, no, let's talk about the versatility of a medevac, because something that's very important is to remember how much capacity it has. So generally it has 8 units of capacity. I think they're based on supply. So anything that costs 1 supply will fill up 1 slot in a medevac. Something that costs 2 supply, etc, etc, etc. So you can fit 8 Marines in there, you can fit 4 Marauders, you can fit 2 Widow Mines, 2 tanks, you can, surprisingly, you can fit 4 Hellions, but Hellions can turn into Hellbats, and you can only have 2 Hellbats in there. And I'll explain why when we talk about the Hellbat, because some of you probably know why. Yeah, and what are the ground units? Oh, it can pick up 1 Thor. Now this is really good as well. You don't see it very often, but it is a really nice tactic. If you rush a Thor and you drop that into the mineral line, as we saw with the 8 Marines earlier, 8 Marines are not going to stop a Thor. But the only reason you would want to do that is because when you consider you're at a Thor, your opponent is definitely going to have Marines and Marauders if they build the MMM strategy. Or any other composition, because you're always going to have Marines. Oh, except for mech, but we'll talk about mech when we go to do build orders. Yeah, so I'm going to have a quick swig of my drink and then we'll move on to the Raven. Okay, so the Raven, as we spoke about before, it has some really nice spells. Now, the only time you would ever build Mass Raven is when the game goes on to the end game and you need cost-efficient units. Because what you have to remember is units like the Raven, and I would not say the Ghost, because like I said, they're not really good in the TVT matchup. All these spells go off energy, so as long as you keep your Ravens alive, you have an infinite resource. It regenerates infinitely until the unit dies. So spend it liberally. And it's a phenomenal beast, right? Look at that. The Seeker Missile. Now, Seeker Missiles wreck everything. Let's build a couple of siege tanks. Marauders don't shoot up, let's build a couple of them. Oh, it's not on the M, is it? It's a D for Dorado. Sandstorm confirmed. What else? Vikings on the ground, yeah. Let's build a couple of them. Alright, cool. Let's bring you guys in. So this thing does splash damage and it just does massive damage. So there are a lot of good uses for it, but like I said, they're always going to have Marines. They're going to have some level of Marines, or even if they go mech, they're going to have Thor. So anti-air wrecks Ravens. It rips them apart. They are very fragile. Even though it's got 140 health, it's fragile and it's expensive. So you don't want to wreck it. You don't want to lose it. I need to stop saying the word wreck. But I like what it does. So the important thing about the Seeker Missile is its 5-second delay. Now the way this works is if the unit can get away in those 5 seconds, it stops the missile. But once the 5 seconds are over, if it's still locked on, it doesn't matter how fast they run, it's going to hit. So if your opponent does something like, you know, you see your units bunched up and he starts targeting with a, you know, a Seeker missile, get that unit out the way. Get him out the way. Yeah. Whoops. No, you guys go back. That was a nice little noise from that, wasn't it? Yeah. So yeah, you just want to, even if you can't get him away from the missile, you just want to get him away from other units, and it gets rid of the splash damage. And of course, tanks are great targets. But like I said, in a TVT specific matchup, they're going to have Marines with that tank army. Unless it's mech, of course they're going to have Thor, which will destroy the Raven. Now, I didn't talk about Thor's other ability, but I don't need to, because it's very rarely used. I don't see anyone use it. Even though the Seeker Missile is really good, it's really powerful, and you will see pro players do it. Actually, let's see if I can pull this off. Here's how you can counter the missile. Because like I said, the tank, it can't shoot up, and if it's in siege mode, it's not going to run away from a Raven. So the tank is a prime target for that missile. The Marines are going to be near it. You can just about shoot it out of range of Marines. And that's going to do a lot of splash damage. You saw it almost kill a Marauder, right? That Marauder has 125 health. It took 100 off. Marines in the splash damage range will take like half their health off the thing. He was in range, and he's down to 75. So he lost 50, was that? Yeah, 50. So that would leave Marines on 5 HP only if you have that upgrade, the combat shield upgrade, because that gives them an extra 10 HP. So a Seeker Missile will not kill Marines in one hit, only if they have the upgrade. Right. So you just saw how much health it took off a Marauder. So it's going to do effective against a lot of other things. Oh no, the Vikings were 140, I think. I was looking at that. I can't remember the Viking. Reapers can't shoot up. They'll get trolled, but you're never going to use it against a Reaper because they're only in the early game. They'll take out Hellions. They won't take out Hellbat. Hellbats are interesting. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, the Vikings right there. Oh, 125 health, so they're just as bad as the Marauder. Okay, so what you can do is if your opponent targets the tank, you should have just enough time to unsiege it. Okay. Well, I have seen it done. I'm not sure if they patched it and changed it, but generally speaking, you should be able to get that tank into the medivac. Now, you want to do that, obviously, to save the tank, because if they're targeting it, it's because you're destroying their forces with it, obviously. Like in, say, a siege situation, like your tank's on the high ground at the front of your base by the wall, and their units are on the other side, and it's taking out, you know, you want to get rid of that tank, and the Seeker Missile is good for it. So you can save the tank that way, or actually, yeah, there's no other way apart from taking the Raven out. So do remember that picking up a tank will negate the Seeker Missile. I'm not sure why it's still... I don't think it was targeting the ground, actually. I even dropped that. No, I haven't. There we go. That tank was saved. Yeah, I don't know if that was a bug in this arcade mode, but it should have cancelled the missile. Because there was nothing there. The missile shouldn't have carried on moving, and that took less than 5 seconds. Okay. So, again, the reason you would use these in the endgame is because of the energy efficiency. Because when there's less minerals on the map, it pays to have all these kind of spells and to do damage. Because you'll have an unlimited resource as long as you keep your ravens alive. And of course, the obvious one is that the Raven can detect. So you're going to use it to scout where the mines to save your command, your orbital command energy for mules. So they're good a little earlier on, because in the late game you'll have so many mules, you'll be microing battles. You're not gonna, you're not gonna realize that you've got energy in your command center. It will sit there dormant. So you want to use that to scan as well. So they're good in like the mid game for detection. Again, point defense drone is amazing. Let's do a test of the point defense drone, shall we? So we'll wait for that to get over. So what the point defense drone does, the PDD, is it shoots down any projectiles. Now, I say any, I do mean any. The Marine does not fire a projectile. The tank does not fire a projectile. If you're in range of either of them, it's an instant hit. Yeah, you have to remember that. So, oh, also, these guys, the Vikings, they obviously, they do instant hit as well. They don't have projectiles. So let's find something that has projectiles. Oh, got rid of me, Raven. Oh well. Raven! And let's get a bunch of Marauders over there, so I can demonstrate this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the barracks, the Marauders are going to attack it, and the PDD will stop all the attacks from the Marauders. And these are out for a little bit of time, so that's cool. So let's put a couple here. Zoop zoop. You guys go here. These things, as far as I know, are untargetable. But Marine... Actually, no, I think they are targetable, but obviously a Viking's not going to hit it. Because it's going to shoot the missiles out the air, and a Marine is going to hit it. Yes, I remember that one. I think it gets rid of battlecruiser stuff, but yeah, let's just land it. Let's have a look at this. Yeah, that's the power of the PDD. So having that at the end of the game, that is the Raven's counter to the Viking. You know, what is a Viking gonna do? Obviously, it's gonna keep shooting until the PDD disappears. Haha, no. Sorry, guys. Actually, do you know what? No, that barracks has been sitting around long enough. It can die. Go away. Yeah, so the PDD is really good in those kind of situations. I'm not sure if it works on roaches. It does work on Hydralisks, but Hydralisks, you have less time to get out the way because Hydralisks fire very quickly. And of course, if we stemmed up the Marauders, they would fire a lot faster. So you'll burn through the energy on the PDD a lot faster. So it's better used as an escape mechanism. Stop the Vikings attacking so you can move your Ravens out the way and give them time to get behind your front lines. Stop the Marauders, maybe getting up close to your Thor, for example. And that's about it. It won't do much against tanks and Marines. So in a TVT map, that's another reason why you would go for Marine tank compositions. Yeah, so the next unit is the Banshee. Now, the Banshee is... I wouldn't say it's similar to the Ghost, but in the same sense, it is used in specific situations. Let's bring it out so you can have a look for yourself. It only shoots down, but it does a lot of damage. Yeah, and as you can see over here, grayed out, if I get the research, I can cloak the thing. But this research comes from the tech lab. You have to be careful of this, because the Academy has a cloak purely for ghosts, and the tech lab on a starport has a cloak purely for Banshees. They don't cross over. If they did, they would be very broken. But we'll talk about Terran upgrades in a sec and why the Terran are really advantageous. Look at that, he's already killed them all. Right. So the Banshee can only shoot down, and it is quite brittle. I think that's the same HP as the Raven. But like I said, the Raven's quite brittle as well. Marines are the counter to it, but there are two reasons you use the Banshee, and both reasons are harassment. You can, I suppose, use them in the mid and late game, but generally they are like post-early, pre-mid kind of harassment. So you would go, you start with your Reaper, kill a few SCVs, slow your opponent down, then you build into the Hellions, you take out some more SCVs if you can, but if your opponent's walled off, obviously you're not getting those Hellions in there, and you still transition over, regardless, to the Banshee. Now, because the Banshee's flying, a wall's not going to do anything against it, but if your opponent wises up and notices you're going for a Banshee harassment after you've done a Hellion harassment, they're going to build a missile turret into their mineral line, because that's how you beat a Banshee harass. You detect it with a missile turret, and the missile turret will shoot it down as well. They suck against missile turrets, like, hard. Yeah, and the reason I wouldn't put them in the same specific, you know, very specialist situation as a ghost is because that harassment actually has its uses. I think two Banshees should easily be able to wreck SCVs. I think it takes 2 volleys. Let's have a look. 2 attacks, 12 damage, that's 24, double it up, that's 48. So yeah, 2 shots from a Banshee, from 2 Banshees will destroy SCVs. Now, obviously, the Hellion's going to do better, but you have to remember the advantages of the Banshee. It's air and it cloaks, so it's a lot harder to stop a Banshee attacking your SCV line than it is to stop Hellions coming in through the front door. Always build the wall. Yeah. So the safest start for a Marine, if you really want to play defensive, is build your wall, 4 Marines, and then build a missile turret. And hey presto, your mineral line is safe. Because your opponent isn't going to keep spamming Reapers if they can't. If you don't succeed with the first Reaper, you don't carry on. That's it. Right. So, yeah, it's good against tanks. Obviously, tanks don't shoot up, and it's okay against Marauders, because Marauders don't shoot up either, but both of them obviously have a lot of HP compared to other units. And of course, if there's mass Marines, it's going to get rid of the Banshee as long as they can see them. So, what you're trying to do with the Banshee in the early game is not only harass and destroy your SCVs, but the second thing you're trying to do is force the scan from the command center. That's very, very important, because I'm not sure what the exact maths is, but a mule it's phenomenal. The amount of mineral you get from 1 mule is phenomenal compared to an SCV, and it's free. So the orbital command, your first 50 energy, you want to use it on the mule as soon as possible. Your second, you want to use it on the mule. Every bit of energy from that orbital command, don't bother putting it on your supply depots. You're just making them bigger targets. If you bump up the amount of supply, I'll show you what I mean actually. I should probably point at these spells. So you can expand the capacity of a supply depot. I think that actually doubles it. Don't do it! You just make your supply depot a bigger target, and when you lose that supply depot, you lose 16 supply. That's massive. You don't ever want to do that. That's like 2 battle cruisers and a couple of Marines, yeah? Don't do it. Don't ever use that spell. It's just there for people who think, why not? Or maybe people who just want to be... Oh yeah, okay. So it does have advantages when you ignore the 100 mineral, but a mule will get you far more mineral faster. You just have to remember that the mule doesn't give you extra mineral. It only gives you more. It gives you it faster. Okay, so you want to force that scan out, because the scan and the mule cost exactly 50 energy. So for every scan you force out of your opponent just messing about with that Banshee, they've lost 1 mule, and you gain a significant economic advantage in a Terran versus Terran matchup. So that's why the Banshee fits better into TVT matchups over the Ghost. I very rarely use the Ghost, even in TVP, which I should do. But I'm a bad player. So the Banshee, again, it has its uses. It has really good uses in the early game. It should be used for harassment, purely harassment. En masse, the only reason you would want to do it en masse is if you think your opponent is stupid. Sorry, that's a very bad thing to say. Don't underestimate your opponent. If you can work out, if you can get into their mind and decipher their mind games, like if they're going pure Marauder because they think they're the best thing ever, don't be afraid to go Banshees. Yeah, I mean, obviously a tank is going to stop Marauders faster, but why not just mix it up a bit? And I'll tell you why you'd want to mix it up, because of the way the Terran upgrades have changed massively this year. This year they did one of the biggest changes to the Terrans, and it affects everything. The Terran ground vehicles, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, so the Terran ground vehicles and the Terran air vehicles, they share the same upgrade. This is massive, because previously if, for example, you were going, say you had tanks and marines, right? So you maybe would invest in ground armor for your vehicles and infantry armor for your marines and marauders. You wouldn't have the Vespene or the mineral to invest in the air upgrades. So your opponent only has to dupe you once. They have to show a couple of tanks and you think, right, he's going tanks, let's get some ground forces on the go. And he brings out a marine. Sorry, he brings out a battlecruiser. What are you going to do against a battlecruiser that's 3/6? Don't forget it has that extra 3 armor. And tanks can't shoot up. Hellions can't shoot up. What other ground vehicles are there? The Widowmine didn't exist originally. But I think it was out when the changes were there. Thor can shoot up. Thor could possibly work against a battlecruiser. But if all your Thor is shooting at battlecruisers, that awesome tanky battlecruiser, nothing's hitting the ground army. Nothing's hitting the Vikings, which are going to destroy whatever air force you have. So, but you can't have an air force because obviously you can't transition. So, this is massive because now it allows a lot of versatility for the Terrans. If you're going to go mech, you don't have to worry if you then suddenly have to pump out a few Vikings because you've already got the upgrades. It's massive. Right, so let's get back on topic. And yes, I was talking about the Banshee. So, Banshee, between the early and mid-game transition, you would want to use this for harassment. One of the signs that you shouldn't use it is if, for a start, if your Reaper does really bad, like it gets killed by the SCVs, just don't bother with the Hellions, because that means you're, no offense, it means you haven't got the micro to use the Reaper properly. So just stay away from that kind of build, just go for your MMM strategy. Yeah, and of course, if you try to send Hellions into their base and you can't get through the front door, a Banshee might be acceptable, but you have to remember you have no vision. That's the important thing to pick up from that, because you don't know if they're going to go for an early Viking. Because if they go for an early Viking and a missile turret that you can't see, you're going to waste a lot on the Banshee. It's not the cheapest of unit. It's not the most expensive, but it's not the cheapest because of that cloak. You have to research the cloak separately. That's going to cost you a lot as well. So it's an interesting unit. It's one that I shy away from because I don't have the macro to go Reaper, Hellion, Banshee, harassment. Because the reason is, if you fail with that strategy, you're going to be behind. I know it sounds like it's risky, but that's why you need to be good with your micro and macro to do that kind of strategy, because someone who is good with the macro and good with the micro will be able to get the most efficient trade out of it. They'll be able to kill 4 or 5 SCVs with the Reapers, and then your opponent's going to be behind, so you're going to get the Hellions in faster, you're going to do the damage earlier, which will then put them behind even more, and then you'll hit them with the Banshees, and by that time, they're probably still on a 1 base just building their 2nd base economy. So you just roll in your army then, because you'll be building Marines in the background. There's no reason to build anything else because they're behind. So the Banshee is a good unit, you just gotta know how to use it, and I'm not confident, so be very careful. Whew, right, well that was a long talk. Okay, so my favourite unit, the Battle Cruiser. Yeah, so like I said, he is a beast. I haven't got any Terran upgrades here. Look, these are the level 1 upgrades. Nothing. And he's already at, 3 armor. 3 armor, 550 HP. He is a formidable beast. But as I said earlier, lots of little things can take out one big thing. The most cost-efficient trade, and it's very difficult to do. I've only ever seen it become successful against Tasia, and it was Innovation versus Tasia. That was a phenomenal match. That was like watching 2 gods fighting against each other. And what Innovation did was very, very interesting. He's one of the few pro Terrans that have actually adopted the Widowmine and tried new things to get them into play. Oh, I didn't do Hellbats. Sorry. But I will get onto Hellbats. So the Battle Cruiser, lots of little things can beat it. And what Innovation did was he built 5 Widowmines. because he calculated those 5 widow mines are going to do exactly enough damage in one volley to take out a battlecruiser. The battlecruiser is slow, the widow mine is faster, but the battlecruiser's rate of fire means you have to be very careful with your widow mines, so you're going to be kiting them around with other forces to take out the battlecruiser, so it's not easy to do. And the other disadvantage about the battlecruiser is it's incredibly slow. Its move speed is deliberately slow, because if it was really fast, it would get around the battlefield really quick, take out lots of units, and it would also be able to kite for days. You don't want a battlecruiser kiting. It's bad. If you can't take a battlecruiser down and you're forever chasing it, just stop playing Starcraft. Sorry, that's really harsh, but you can't just let a battlecruiser run away. So the rate of fire out of them is really, really high. So they can get 4 full shots off per second, and at 6 damage, that's doing a lot more than most of the other units we've seen. That's doing 24 points of damage per second, which is massive. Massive, 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 massive. So they are actually really good at their counterparts, the Marines, because that 24 is basically 2 seconds and your Marine's dead. And in 2 seconds, a Marine is not going to do much damage to a battlecruiser. But lots of Marines will, because a battlecruiser cannot hit lots of targets at once. So lots of little things beats one big thing. But one of the most powerful weapons in the game, that 300 points of damage, that is huge. So your battlecruiser is, in a sense, it is specialist, because you would want to use it to break the most hardened defenses. If there is lots of bunkers at your enemy base, send in a battlecruiser. It's not going to go down very easily, so you will have time to fire off the Yamato cannon. You see that 3-second cooldown? I think that applies to its shot as well. So 3 seconds it takes to fire the Yamato cannon. So for that amount of time, it's not doing anything. It's just absorbing damage, so you have to be careful of it. So they're really good for breaking defenses. And again, they're really good for tanking. So if, for example, you wanted to go mass Raven, put in a couple of battlecruisers in there, because they will absorb a lot of the damage while the Ravens do the rest of the work. Because you can get the Ravens actually to boost the defensive capabilities, don't forget, with the PDD. So the PDD will stop things hitting the battlecruiser, so they stay alive longer. Yep. Okay. And what else? Yeah, so with 300 points of damage, a battlecruiser can one-shot a missile turret, and it will fire out of the range of a missile turret. So you do want a couple of them in an air-heavy Terran composition. And that's another thing about the Banshee as well. They may not do so well like on their own, floating around the map, trying to take on an army. They get scanned, they get killed. But if you're going for a mass air army, which isn't done so much these days, because it's a long tech path to get to, because you have to go supply depot, barracks, factory, and then your starport, then the tech labs on the starports. So it's like right at the top of the tree. In fact, after you've got the starport, you then need to build this, the fusion core, just to unlock the battlecruiser. So Terran Air is the longest possible route you can take through the Terran tech tree. So that's why that's one of the other reasons they're not generally used so well. The reason for that long tech tree build is obviously because that's the end game. So you can bring battlecruisers in the end game. They do really well against anything that doesn't shoot up, obviously, which makes them prime destroyers of Ultralisks. They will obliterate Ultralisks, because you can half the health of them. Just one shot with the Yamato cannon, you've half the health, then just like pew 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 pew, take that bastard out. I like them just because they're big and tanky, because any player that doesn't know how to take on battlecruisers is just gonna die to them. And like I said earlier, and demonstrated earlier, mass Viking obliterates battlecruisers. Right. Oh yeah, be aware of the energy consumption as well. Yamato requires 100 energy. That's a lot. It recharges quite slow, the same amount of speed it takes to charge up anything. So it charges a lot slower than other units. Okay, now the Hellbat is a very interesting unit. Because if you're going to go for a mech composition, you definitely want the Hellbat. Compared to their Hellion counterparts, they fire in a wide cone, which makes them really good to drop an SCV line. So let's simulate an SCV line. You'd have more than that, but who cares? You're going to get the effect of it anyway. I'm going to be like in a sort of crescent kind of shape, because they'll be all over the place. Yeah. Alright. Okay, let's get our medevac. Now, only 2 at a time. There we go. You set off. And when you drop them into the SCV line, now, don't forget, this isn't going to be quite accurate because these guys are going to run all over the show. Whereas if they're in a mineral line, they've not got much space to run away. Because normally your mineral line is at a cliff. It's the most defended part of your base, your main base. So you can get these guys as fast as you can get the armory. And any Hellions you still have alive will just turn into Hellbats once you've got the upgrade. And what is a nice thing to do is to carry 4 Hellions to your designation, like just off the enemy base somewhere in this route. Drop them whilst you're upgrading whilst you're getting the servo motors upgrade, which allows the Hellion to turn into the Hellbat, and then stick them in the medevac, drop them on the enemy base, go get the other 2, drop them on the enemy base. Now, unupgraded, these guys do a lot of damage. It only takes 2 of these guys to kill SCVs. Yeah, so remember the SCVs are going to be running around like idiots. Now, Hellbat drops were massively nerfed because when they were in beta, everyone was using them. They would destroy everything. So their damage has been lowered considerably. But when you change the Hellion into the Hellbat, it becomes a much tougher unit. And also, magically, you know, this 4-wheeled vehicle becomes biological. Yeah, right, if you don't believe me, right, and this is bullshit. Boom, boom. Biological. Mechanical. Now, mechanical units can be repaired by SCVs. So, if you bring SCVs, which you're going to do in a mech composition, not only are you going to be healing these guys by medevacs, but you're also going to be healing them by SCVs. They will regenerate their health really fast. And because they have that extra 10... oh god, it's more than 10. Wow, okay. Because of that extra 45 HP, they're going to be really tanky in the front line. And of course, because they can change between Hellion mode and, you know, Hellbat mode, they're going to move around the map quite fast. 4 seconds to change. And look at that speed boost. Outside their base. And go mess them up. Okay. So the Hellbat, generally in a TVT matchup, you would want to use it if you're going mech. Now, obviously the MMM, as I've stated, is the best strategy if you're trying to learn Terran. You counter that with tanks and marines, and then you counter that with mech. Mech is harder to do because it requires a lot of Vespene heavy units. The Hellbat doesn't require the Vespene, but the servo motor transition does. You researched that in the tech lab, I believe. Okay, by default it's on. I think originally this was one of the things I was talking about where they were really powerful because you could just turn them into, you know, Hellions at the start, which is broke as shit. Actually, did his health drop? Yeah, so that's what you got to be careful as well. If you do turn them into Hellions and send them across the map, then they're easier to be picked off, especially by Widow Mines. Whereas if they are in Hellbat mode, they will not be taken out by Widow Mines, which is another good reason for putting them in a mech composition. And once you research the blue flame, let's do that and check the damage differences, shall we? Whoops, I'm gone. Default! Okay, so He's doing 18 damage. That one does 14 damage versus light. So imagine they're both in the SCV line. We upgrade to blue flame. Boom.
Research
and
complete.
There we go. It does an extra 30 damage versus light. 48 damage. Now, when you send them into a mineral line, you know your opponent isn't getting away. They just... it's a massacre. I love it. It's not a strategy I use very often because I'm 100% sure of the build order. Where are your SCVs? Yeah, looks about right. You guys, off you go. Oh yeah, that's another thing to point out. You can get them earlier than you would a Banshee, because once you have the armory, you then don't need the time to wait for a tech lab. Okay, so you're going to build into the factory, then you're either going to go starport or you're going to go armory, right? So then the next step, to build the Banshee harass strategy, you then need a tech lab. But once you have that armory, you can automatically turn into... Oh wait, I just realised. You're still going to need the starport anyway. Yeah. So technically it is actually longer. Huh. Yeah, because you're going to need... Oh no, because you're still not going to need... Yeah, alright, yeah. Okay, so the Banshee's going to need cloak as well. And you don't need the servo motor to get the Hellbat, you just need the armory. The armory alone allows you to build Hellbats without the ability to transform. That's the important thing to remember about the Hellbats. So what you'll do is when you get your factory, your siege tank will be greyed out, your Thor will be greyed out, but these three won't. So you can even build them two at a time out of the factory. So they basically can come out at the exact same time as the Hellion, and you could also give them the blue flame. So in essence, you're basically removing the need for a tech lab on the starport, you're removing the need for the cloak to be researched, and the Banshee build time is far less than, say, a Hellbat build time, as far as I know. Yeah, this arcade mode doesn't show the numbers, so I can't really show you accurately, but watch this. Mess them up, boys! Oh, yes. Yes. So, maybe these guys aren't classed light, I don't know. Should be light. Yeah, light. 25 L. Why is that? Oh, I see, so it's not adding 30 on, it's just doing 30. Oh, I always thought it added it on. Oh well, shows how much I know about Starcraft. Right. So, as you can see, they do a lot of damage in the mineral line. They will mess everything up. So, they're really good for dropping, but that nerf, as you can see, they're not killing the Hellions right away. That's what happened when they balanced out the Hellbats. They literally just took the damage from them, so you couldn't just drop them and that's it. GG. End the game. Okay, so in TVT, they are still effective, just as much as like any harass strategy is always effective. So going Reaper, Hellion, and Banshee in TVT is still very viable, very, very viable, especially depending on how much damage you do with that first Reaper. And if your opponent, because he thinks, oh, I'm in a TVT, I'm not going to build the wall, obviously you're just going to roll the Hellions in. And you're going to know that, because if they're not building the wall, where are they building their supply depot and their barracks? They're going to build it right next to the command center, just so they can shorten the amount of distance it takes for the SCV to come back and continue mining. I think an SCV mines 120 mineral a second. Sorry, not a second, a minute. So if he spends 10 seconds getting to your ramp and back, you know, you've lost, is that 40? Yeah, about 40 mineral. No, it's 40 times 6. Yeah, you lost 20 mineral. Sorry. So that may sound like a little bit, but that's, you know, more than a third of a marine. At the early game, the amount of mineral you get, those small chunks of mineral, matter a lot more in the early game than they do the mid and late game, which is why you want to do a harass strategy. That's why they work, because if you can keep your opponents on about 10 SCVs, it doesn't matter if they've got a mule, because they're still only mining at about 15 SCV capacity, whereas nothing's stopping you. So you just keep rolling out the SCVs. You put your bases on the hotkeys, and you just keep rolling out the SCVs while you're trashing theirs, and you'll have a massive economical advantage. But of course, any smart Terran can counter the harass strategy with the ways I've mentioned. A couple of Marines at the start will just beat the Reaper outright. You just can't touch the mineral line then. The wall obviously stops the Hellions, and then the missile turret stops the Banshee. But it's even more simpler than that. Because I mean, you can just mix bunkers into it. It used to be that you would build bunkers into the SCV, the mineral line, but I've not seen it that much, because Terran players have now wisened up. You don't need that much defense. Obviously, the reasoning behind it is the bunker will both protect against the early Reaper, and it will protect against the Banshee, as long as you can scan it. But obviously you're wasting scans, so they don't do it. You're wasting 100 mineral, so they don't do it. And they're beginning to counter in different ways. The turret is also smaller than a bunker, so you're not disrupting the flow of minerals. Yeah, Terran mech is very, very, very tanky. It's good against tanks in that regard as well, because they rely a lot on splash damage that does massive amounts of damage. Thors will just walk up to tanks and beat the shit out of them. Hellbats will tank a lot of damage from the likes of Marauders. Let's have a look. I think Marauders are good against Armoured. Let's just double check this. Yeah, versus Armoured. They do more damage against Armoured. So they're not going to do much damage to Hellbats, but they are going to do it to your Thor, your tanks. But hey, good luck getting to them through the Hellbats. And the Hellbats are still going to do significant amounts of damage to a Marauder. Even if, you know, it's that cone effect, isn't it? They do splash damage the same way a tank does. Groups of them will do massive amounts of splash damage on a focus point. And that's because of the concave effect. Yeah, so your Thors will protect from the skies, your tanks will protect at long range surprisingly well, and your Hellbats will just tank everything. They tank better than tanks. But I have seen some very interesting builds, and it was a super aggressive build. I think, oh, I really can't remember who it was, but it was on one of the snow maps. It wasn't it might have been Polar Knights actually. It was the one where it's like the map dips in at the middle and there's a round area with 2 gold bases. I watched a Terran play that. It was either Pulse or it was Innovation, but to be honest, it could have been anyone. And what he did was he got some Hellions at the start for his usual map control, keeping his opponents in his base, but then he went for the transformation servos, and he started building more factories, and it was funny. It was so funny to watch, because Day 9 is like, I don't even know what to say here. And it's like, all I can think right now is he's building he's building barracks, he wants to use them, and he's building factories, so he's obviously going to use them. And what did he do? He went for a Marauder and a Hellbat push, and it worked so well, because of course the Marauder hammers against armoured units really well, and then the Hellbats will just hammer light units really well. And of course, when the Hellbat is, you know, in its Hellbat mode and not a Hellion, it is also a biological unit. So they're both then bolstered by the medevac. So that actually allows a lot of adaptations for the Terran. Because before the Hellbat, you know, your Hellions were pretty much useful at the start of the game, and then they're dead. There's no point using them. Unless, say, your opponent decides to build a lot of Zerglings, like the Hyun versus Pult match I spoke about earlier, where he just built 70 Zerglings, build a couple of Hellions, and take care of them behind the wall really easily. Um, yeah, so you want the help. So it works well if you're going up to a mech composition, because the medevac will buff your units enough, it will heal them enough that you don't have to worry about the infantry upgrades. As far as I know, the Hellbat isn't affected by infantry upgrades. It's still mechanical. It still goes. It's like the picture said it. You know, it goes off the mech upgrades. So it will be. I don't know a build that does it. A player that does do this kind of build, but it makes sense if you think about it. You do your Hellion push, and then you turn them into Hellbats. You pump out Marauders, and whilst they're doing a lot of massive tanking and forward aggression, if you don't win with that strategy, you know, you're still going to do a lot of damage. You're still going to take out a lot of the units that come your way. They will definitely take out Marines. Even if the Hellbats have to run up front, the Marauders are going to trash the Marines. So that is the perfect precursor to a mech strategy. Because the next step is obviously, whilst they're doing damage, you just bring out your tanks, you get your mech upgrades behind the scenes whilst the medivacs are healing all your units. Because that's all you want. You want them to sustain long enough so you can make the transition. And of course, if you are putting Hellbats into the composition, you're going to have a lot of tech labs, a lot of factories, so you don't have to worry about bringing them out with a reactor, because you're going to have extra factories, so you can just pump them out like 3 or 4 at a time. I think that just about covers it. So I'm going to post this up to YouTube at some point. If you're watching on YouTube, hi. And feel free to go back, look at some of the things I've talked about. And like I said, this video is the specific TVT matchup. Now, in essence, it doesn't matter what strategy you go for, what units you pick, and what can counter what. At the end of the day, every unit does damage. So, you know, Marines are still going to do damage to a tank, even if they can't get close. If you get 200 Marines, run them at tanks, they're going to hit the tanks eventually. Sort of. I kind of destroyed my brother when he did that, but I did have about like 10-20 tanks, so but yeah, in essence, because they still do damage, you can kind of win with any composition. It's just a lot harder for you to beat the counter strategy. So generally speaking, if you go, for example, Marines, they go tanks, and you're like, crap, I've got nothing to kill the tanks, they're going to beat your army, then they're going to hit your base. So working with what you have is very important. That's why I want to teach you the Marine Marauder Medevac build first, because it's a solid build, it's quite easy to do, and it's very noob friendly. Or should I say beginner friendly, if I'm going to be politically correct. So I'm going to take a short break, and then when I come back, I will show you that build order and how to execute it properly. Right, thank you. How do I stop streaming?